I'm the Director of Career Services, and today we are going to be talking about resumes and how to best prepare your resume for the internship or job that you want. So, when we think about what a resume is, right, it's a summary of your experiences and the skills that are relevant to the field of work that you're entering. So, we want to put the most relevant information on our resume. And it's also the accomplishments that are really driving your brand and your marketing. That when you're seeking an internship or employment, full time job, that employers can just glance at and see all that you have accomplished. And it also relates your experience, whether that is in clubs on campus or part time work, to your career objectives. So, the purpose of a resume, the goal of any good resume is to show that you're a qualified candidate and that you are a good match for the job. So, the resume motivates the employers to interview you, right? It's the very first impression that they often get. It's the first time sometimes that your name comes across their desk. And so, they need to be able to glance at it and concisely and descriptively see that you are a good fit for the job. And remember, most employers spend less than 30 seconds on a resume, especially for an entry level job. So we recommend that undergraduates keep their resume to only one page. So, in preparation, you do have to know yourself well. So, you've got to ask yourself a few questions. How can you target your resume to the company and the job that you're applying for? And then next, you're going to really think through what we like to call your VIPs, your values, your interests, your personality, and your skills, but also your accomplishments, your education, your goals, and those things you've experienced, even if they weren't in a full time position. So then you actually want to know the position itself, right? So you know yourself, and then we get to know the position. So you can really tailor and match what they are looking for with the skill sets that you bring to the table through presenting that on your resume. So do your research and tailor your resume to the position you're applying for. You're definitely going to have to look at the job description to do this. And of course, don't ever claim something, a skill set, or an experience about yourself that is not true. Your resume has to be 100% truthful, but you do want to look at the job description and try to make sure that you are communicating those top skill sets that the employer is looking for. So, these list of skills here and these sections need to be that you are familiar with for this job. So, the necessary skills required for the right person in this job. Desired qualifications, required education and work experience, and then the job duties so that you can try to mirror those in your experience through your resume. So there are different types of resumes. For a traditional aged undergraduate student or even for a master's level, most of the time we are going to use a chronological resume, and that is in reverse order of time. So that is starting with the most recent opportunities and going back in time. There are other types of resumes that you'll see here: functional, targeted, combination resumes. Those can be more for adult learners sometime, but also for circumstances that might fit individual cases. So we are happy to review these specific kinds if you are looking at a different type of resume that is not the traditional reverse chronological. So, reverse chronological. So, this is the standard format. Most employers prefer and are used to looking at these. They are date oriented. So, they provide a history of your education, your experience. They start with the most recent first. That might even be your current education that you're pursuing, where you would put your expected graduation or current jobs. And it really highlights the consistent work that you've done, even if it's volunteer. If you've done that consistently, then that can be added as experience on your resume, and make sure that you add job titles so that the employer understands exactly what you were in charge of, responsible for, and what your specific duties were. So, some basics that we like to present to students: your resume needs to be a clear, concise, and simple format. You're going to want to use the same type of font, whether it's font size. You want to use 1 inch margin settings most of the time. Though, if you have a lot of information on your resume and it's starting to get longer than one page, you might want to reduce that to the narrow setting of margins in Microsoft Word. We suggest Times New Roman or Arial, anywhere between 10 to 12 point font. So feel free to drop your font down even to 10 or 11 if you need to save room on your resume. We suggest you don't use templates because they really are not as easy to use as just starting out on a Word document. Don't use color fonts or pictures. You're going to want to refrain from using personal information. We like to make this note very clear to international students who are used to a CV. International is often much longer and much more personal. So in the US, a domestic resume, it's going to not include a lot of personal information. We suggest you use bullet points to describe your experience so that you can have concise statements. Print your resume on white or a neutral 8.5 by 11 inch paper so that you have some with you if you're going to a job interview or meeting someone. Have some hard copies with you. We also recommend resume paper, which is the nice thicker paper if you know that you will be interacting with the hiring manager. So there are a lot of different sections you can have on a resume. Some of those we, of course, want to include, like at the top with your heading, that is going to be your name in bold and slightly larger than the rest of your resume, your contact information. Please ensure that you're using a professional email address, even if it's one you've set up for yourself. It does not have nicknames or anything inappropriate in it. You would list your phone number, of course. Please listen back to your own voicemail in case an employer calls you and gets your voicemail to ensure that's professional. You also want to, if you list your address, just be aware that there is not as much need anymore to list your physical street address. If you'd like to put the city and state, great, but they don't have to necessarily know, or if they're not going to be mailing you hard copy of anything, where you live. Then you're going to have your next section being education. You're going to start with your current education and go back in time. Your work experience is going to be, that can be somewhat fluid, right? It might have been part time work that you've had, on campus jobs. If it is a volunteer experience that you went to a lot, not just a one or a two-time thing, say you volunteered consistently at a community resource center or Boys and Girls Club, for example, then if you do that regularly or weekly, then that can be on your resume as experience. You'll want to put extracurricular activities, maybe leadership experience. If you are a college athlete, we suggest you add that section to your resume because that becomes a part-time job more or less, almost a full-time job. A lot of our athletes might say on their experience on their resume so that they can communicate if they were not as involved in clubs or organizations or didn't have time for a part-time job. We want to make sure that employers understand they were a college athlete and all that entails. And then, of course, any honors and awards, certifications that might be specific to your degree field. And this can vary slightly, as we mentioned. All right, so our heading at the top, center of the page, you want your name to stand out. This might be the one place that you use a different type of font, but please don't make it too cursive or where you can't read it. And you want, as we mentioned earlier, name, city, state, phone number, and email address. Here's an example. Your education. Start with the highest level of completion first and go in reverse chronological order. So you would want to put your current bachelor's or master's program at Troy University with an expected graduation date and go back in time. Though, once you're past your freshman year in college, we recommend that you do not list your high school unless there's some specific reason. Say you wanted to be a teacher there and you wanted them to know that you went to that high school. High school information is not as relevant anymore. If you need some of it to pull because you don't have much on your resume, that might be some volunteer that you've done. But for the most part, unless it is a very large accomplishment, say you were elected to girl state or boy state for the whole state, that might be something you list. But ultimately, we're not going to list our education, high school education, under that category. You want to list your major, your minor, your concentration, or any emphasis that you might have in that area. We recommend you list your GPA if it's a 3.0 or higher. And again, don't include high school information unless it's totally relevant to the position. Here's a sample. You can see out to the right, we've put expected graduation. This is how it looks on the resume under the heading. Right, so employment experience is oftentimes next. If you don't want to put the word employment, if you want to put just experience, if it's not all paid, that's acceptable too. So you want to include positions that you've held that are related most directly to the job you're applying for or the field, the industry. That could be paid and volunteer positions. Even if you don't have a lot of direct experience, though, this is still a good section to show skill sets that you have learned from part time work or from organizations or boards that you're involved in. So be creative with this section, really be descriptive using the adjectives that are very descriptive to show what all you've accomplished. You don't want to start every bullet point with coordinated or something that's very similar. You want to be somewhat creative here. These are transferable skills. These are things you have learned, say, being a student worker on campus, of how to be a good employee, how to report on time. Maybe you work in retail or fast food where you have dealt with customer service a lot, or you've had to balance a financial drawer to the penny and be responsible for opening and closing the store or inventory. So, really make sure you include those things that you have learned that are transferable. You want to list your accomplishments, not just your responsibilities, right? You want to put all that you have actually accomplished in that job. And if you have made it better, especially if you have some numbers that you can quantify that, you want to include that on your resume. Use vocabulary and keywords, kind of the jargon from your chosen field. If you are in a, say, a medical field or some type of industry that has a lot of equipment and you've had exposure or training in that, maybe you want to use that on your resume. You want to quantify your actions whenever possible, whenever you can, how many, how much, what you've done, percentages or datas of growth. Use this section as an opportunity to demonstrate and expand on your skills. Okay, so the format, you're going to have the company name with their location. You definitely want to have your job title, even if it was student worker. You want to put on there what your job title was, the dates of employment, and descriptions of the duties you performed and were responsible for. You want to list all of these experiences in reverse chronological order, so current ones to previous. Make this section really easy to read by using spacing, concise bullet points. Use action phrases to highlight the duties that you've performed. Avoid using terms that only an insider would know because it might not translate exactly to the industry that you're applying for. And then if it is a current job, we're going to use present tense. And then if it's a past position, make sure that you use the correct tense, past tense. So you can see here that our Jane S. Doe was a cashier at Chick-fil-A at the Troy location. And we have the job title, the name of the employer, the location, and some descriptors here. And you can see that this person does not just talk about their day-to-day job. They talk about it in a more transferable, larger, more general way, provide friendly customer-oriented dining experience. So that speaks to transferable skills in customer service, trained new staff on restaurant processes and policies. That does not mean that this person was the official supervisor, but you can still list opportunities where you've been entrusted to help train new employees, handled cash, checks, and credit card transactions with accuracy. And you can see the dates out to the side. A next heading might be activities, leadership, involvement, something like that. These are relevant activities that you could discuss with your employer that you've learned a lot from. It's given you valuable experiences or skills that have given you transferable skills that will translate to that job one day. These can be student organizations on campus, in the community, professional organizations in your field if you've joined clubs that are related to your major, community-based activities, if you do activities through our Office of Civic Engagement out in the Troy community or beyond. And you're going to use that same format we discussed for employment experience, so reverse chronological order with some concise statements in bullet points with the date out to the side. So this student, you're going to see they were in Circle K, which is a service organization. They were the service chair. So they go ahead and list that, and they talk a lot about what their responsibilities were. So you can see they quantify it. They were weekly meetings, right? That they they were advocates for concerns and interests of student athletes, that they were representative of their university on a larger Sun Belt committee. And then they also list the Criminal Justice Club. So they participated in monthly meetings and again quantified that they helped organize a fundraiser for $1,000 for local charities. So if you are an athlete, you're going to include information in this section: the sport you play, the years you've played, accomplishments, certificates or awards you've won, especially if they're academic related, time devoted to training. If you received a scholarship, you may choose to include that as well. And you want to use action verbs and action words that are going to be translatable to the workforce. So you can see here, this Jane S. Doe was a member of the women's soccer team, Division One women's soccer team. They received a full athletic scholarship. They were team captain. That's key to list there. And for any leadership positions you have in organizations or sports, it doesn't have to be that you are the president or the vice president. Like it mentioned earlier, maybe you're a chair of a committee. Maybe you helped fundraise and were on the philanthropy committee. So make sure you include any or leadership opportunities that you have had. You can see they were named Sun Belt Freshman of the Year, devoted 20 hours a week to athletics, and so forth and so on. The skill sets that they have developed being a student athlete. Honors, include your honors if you have made the chancellor's list, if you have had athletic honors or work experience honors, anything that you've been given. If you're employee of the month for a certain month, make sure you include those honors and certificates that you've been given where you were appointed or called out, in a positive way. But you want to put a brief explanation out to the side of what that means. Employers don't necessarily know exactly what, say, the chancellor's or the provost list is. So you're going to want to say it's a specific GPA that's achieved, etc. You can see here, these honors are listed. They were Sunbelt Commissioners list, and it says students who maintain a 3.5 or higher GPA. That's helpful if you're not familiar with the Sunbelt Commissioners list. Chancellor's list, Alpha Phi Sigma. So that is a criminal justice major honor that this person received. So think through, and it's necessary as you are going through your college career to maybe on your notes app or on the live version of your resume, start to update that as often as you can and make yourself notes to add things to your resume because it's a living document, is what we call it. You'll be removing older things, replacing that with more current and updated things. And you want to have a list because it's really hard when you're a senior to remember everything you've done during high school when it's time to apply for a job. Other categories, volunteer experience. This is fine if you have only a 1 day here or one activity here. That's okay to list. A little bit more merit would be if you've consistently volunteered somewhere, but that is okay to list as well. Military experience, of course, that could be a part time or even a full time type of experience. Language proficiencies, no need to list your native language. It would just be if you had exposure to other languages that are not your native language, and you're going to want to put your skill level if it's just introductory or if you were actually fluent in those languages. Certifications and training, these are really, really important if they apply to you. So if you're in any kind of medical field, you're probably going to have some of these certifications and trainings, or it might be accounting where you've sat for certain exams. So that would be important in various fields. And then finally, relevant coursework. We list that last because we would rather fill your resume up with things that are related to your skill sets and your experience and what you have developed that would be transferable, rather than it being courses that you've taken that are just required by your major, because most everyone has that. You can add it if you need it, or if it's something that sits outside of your major that would be of interest. Okay, so here is our finalized resume sample. So you're going to see education, experience with 3 positions under it, activities and leadership, language proficiency, and honors. So for references, you generally don't include references on your resume. You don't have to put references available upon request. Employers know that. You're going to want to choose a professional format where it's just your references, and you want to make sure that you ask those people if they will be a reference for you, so that they know, give them the chance to say yes or no, and they can anticipate an employer reaching out to them. That way they can speak really well on your behalf, and you want to make sure that they have a copy of your resume. So it's going to be 3 to 5 professional references. It's going to be their name, their job title, their company, and their contact information. So you can see we use the same heading as the one on the top of our resume. And then we also listed out our references here, telling exactly their job title, where they work. If you'd like to put their physical location, you can, or if you just want to list their contact information, I would recommend you ask them what they would rather prefer, if it's email or phone. Remember, there's a lot of resume advice out there. There are a lot of templates out there. You don't necessarily have to go buy all of those. I would stick with what we recommend here. We talk to employers all the time, and it could look slightly different. There are various majors across campus that might go longer than a page because their industry is specific to that. So take this base advice of what we give you in the Career Center, but then run it through your major and your faculty and your programs. Always have somebody else overlook your resume. It's great if you're doing that in a class right now. And also in the Career Center, we can help look at your resume. You cannot have a typo or some kind of English grammar mistake on your resume and be taken seriously. They are going to look for opportunities to weed your resume out. So you don't want to give them any cause to do that. And of course, you can contact us in the Career Center. We're in 124 Eldridge Hall. You can reach us via email at troycareer@troy.edu, or you can reach out to us via social media. So thank you for your time.